Is there an emerging cancel culture on the right? That is the question we're going to tackle today as we look at the case of a Home Depot cashier that was fired for making a rather untoward and disgusting comment about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump after her comment was amplified by libs of TikTok and other right-leaning social media personalities. And we're going to discuss, indeed, the two domineering perspectives on this issue. I'm going to give you my perspective, and we're going to think a lot about the relationship between cancel culture and accountability. And we're going to try to distinguish both of those things to see what the path forward is in dealing with intolerant people in a society that has for a long time held tolerance as a virtue. But before we get into that, my friends, I hope all of you are doing well. I am Christian Watson. If you enjoy political and social commentary from a philosophical bent, then please subscribe, like, share, comment, do whatever you can to ensure this message gets out there, even if you disagree with me. Thank you guys so much for your viewership. Now on to the video. So, many of you have probably heard by now, but if you haven't heard, there was an incident that happened that has sparked a debate amongst a lot of people on the right about the nature of cancel culture, accountability, so on and so forth. And in the wake of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, looking at this on a civilizational level, a lot of people have been talking about dialing down the heated rhetoric. Well, in order to dial down the heated rhetoric, you have to have an environment that is conducive to rhetoric that is benign and benevolent. But the problem is, we oftentimes focus too much on our political environment and not enough on our social environment, or in the most egregious case among some actors and commentators, they conflate our political environment with our social environment, and they blend the two. And when you blend the two, you get nothing more than chaos and confusion. So we have to take a very strong look at how we see not only politics, but how we see society, how we see our fellow man, how we see our communities, and how we contextualize issues. Because in some cases, context is everything. But on to this story. So this Home Depot lady, her name is Darcy Waldron Pickney of New York, upstate New York. And in the wake of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, she posted a comment on her private Facebook page. And the comment was in response to the post that said, and I quote, "When I tell you Butler, Pennsylvania is corrupt, but no one wants to listen after today's events, maybe people will start listening." Well, Miss Darcy, she posted the following, quote, "Too bad they weren't a better shooter," in reference to the assassin that tried to take President Trump's life. Now, someone, according to an article by Newsweek, actually recognized this lady at their local Home Depot. So they didn't search her up. They were just at Home Depot and they recognized her. And they posted a video. And I'm going to show you that video right now where they basically confront her. Go.
Are you Darcy Waldron? Yeah?
I was Waldron, yeah.
Okay, from Cayuga? And you think that the shooter should have been a better shot? Is that what you posted on Facebook?
I am at work.
You think that the shooter should have been a shooter, huh?
I am at work.
Yeah, I think that's pretty messed up. Pretty anti-American if you ask me. As a veteran, I'm disgusted. What have you provided to this country? Huh? I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. You are ridiculous. And I'm making you famous.
Okay, the video you just saw was then amplified by Chaya Rarick of Libs of TikTok, where she says, and I quote in her tweet, "Hi, Home Depot. Are you aware that you employ people who call for political violence and the assassination of presidents?" Any comment? That tweet, as of this date, has over 89,000 likes, a lot of comments, many views, and it resulted in Home Depot themselves, from their official corporate account, responding to that tweet with their own tweet. I quote, "Hi, this individual's comments don't reflect the Home Depot or our values. We can confirm that she no longer works at the Home Depot." Now, there have been two dominant schools of thought that have emerged in the wake of this event. One school of thought sees Darcy, the woman at the Home Depot, as a broader abstract caricature, a broader abstract placeholder of the intolerance of the left in society. And on that basis, on that sort of abstract methodology, thinks that her getting fired was not only justified, but that this reflects a strategy that the right should take up in general of pursuing retribution against the left, who in their view have been pursuing retribution against us, a kind of eye for an eye philosophy. The other camp says what happened to her was wrong because it is an incidence of cancel culture, even though what she said was bad. And cancel culture was bad when the left did it, and therefore it also was bad when the right does it. Now, I will be honest with you, I identify more with the second camp, but I think even my side are making very poor arguments, and they're not really speaking to the core of what the first position is actually trying to say. So let me try to do that right now. There indeed has been this culture of vengeance and violence that has been projected by many groups and personalities on the left, whether it be actors like Johnny Depp, who many people were sympathetic to now after his Amber Heard situation, who basically joked about assassinating Donald Trump, whether it be Kathy Griffin, who did hold up a severed head, whether it be Maxine Waters, who said that she's going to get Trump, whether it be, regardless, Chuck Schumer saying there's 6 ways from Sunday that the intelligence community can get back at you, all kind of things that are obviously incendiary. People automatically understand that there is indeed a sentiment on left that reflects that. However, we will always be in error when we refuse to engage in methodologies that are sound. And the methodology used by this position is not methodological individualism. It is methodological collectivism, where you basically say that one person is representative of this entire movement. Therefore, if we want to get the movement, we get the person. Well, first of all, just in reality, that's not true. People are responsible for what they do. That is a moral fact. And therefore, if you're going to analyze what people do, you need to look at what they did on an individual level and then punish them on an individual level. Any other way of measuring their actions would then imply collective guilt. And justice cannot exist in an area of collective guilt, because that would be disembodied justice. Christian, what do you mean disembodied? Like Casper the Ghost? Kind of, sort of, actually. Because justice is simply an ethical principle that regulates how you treat your neighbor. It does not regulate how the community or the society treats a group over here or group over there. That would be a kind of justice that is abstract and fantastical, as opposed to a justice that is measurable and concrete. Do you understand? So if we're going to have a standard of civil society where we can actually hold people responsible for their actions, we must view their actions not as some abstract, out there representative of a movement, but instead as their own individual actions. That's the first error the camp that whose viewpoints I disagree with makes. The second error is the equation I see from this camp on a civilizational level of trying to equate retribution and violence with strength. Many people on this camp are saying, like people who believe that the right has been too docile and that does not know what it needs to do when it has power, they have been saying that it's time for us to use power in the same way the left has used power against us. Now, once again, let me just accept that premise, even though I think it has formulation errors, even though I think that it's looking at these things in a little bit too of a broader lens. Let me accept that. You equate, when you have that position, strength with revenge, strength with retribution. It is not strong to punish your enemy. It is not strong to get revenge. It actually is pretty weak. You know why it's pretty weak? Because revenge, retribution, and punishment all emerge from the primal urges that define the lowest parts of our human experience. What did Grotius say in On the Rights of War and Peace in 1625? Grotius said in the second chapter of that book, when he is trying to evaluate decorum and trying to evaluate the structure of civil society, he said that there are two main moral motivations of the human being. There is the first instincts of man. He calls them the first impressions of man, and then there's self-preservation. Self-preservation is higher than the first impressions of man, because the first impressions of man are just what our instincts tell us. We gotta eat, we gotta survive, basic stuff. Well, violence are part of those first impressions of man. So if you're going to argue that we need to regress from civilized man to primitive man and use violence as a means to solve our issues, then argue that. But you're not going to create a better society that way. You're not going to be strong that way. You are embodying the greatest form of weakness, and the right forgets this at their own peril. Violence, retribution, and punishment don't know morality. They don't know society. These things are anti-civil. These things are antisocial, and they do not have a limit if those that willed them also do not have limiting principles. And if you've already resigned yourself to the idea that we need to punish our enemies, then your limiting principles are evidently not in effect. So for those reasons, I reject the first viewpoint. But the second viewpoint leaves much more to be desired too. And there's a question that emerges from this. What is the relationship between cancel culture and accountability culture? So, cancel culture, as best as I understand it, is simply when accountability shifts from the hands of a process that is objective and constrained by limiting principles and overseen by a dispassionate person, and instead goes towards a mob that is driven by passion, that is driven by anger, and that seeks destruction. That is the basic difference. Because people say, this lady should be held accountable for her actions. I agree. She should be. But the source of the accountability is actually what matters the most. Let's say I'm the CEO of Home Depot, and I happen to just be on, or I'm the regional manager for Home Depot, and I happen to be on that lady's Facebook page, and I see that comment run across the screen. I would probably say, yikes, that's not something that I want on my company, and that I can call her, have a private conversation with her, and then proceed to deal with her disciplinarily. That is a very different exercise of accountability than libs of TikTok going to their millions upon millions upon millions of followers and sicking a mob on the company, sicking a mob on the lady, this old, low-level lady, and getting her. Is that true accountability? That's mob justice, which is no justice. A civil society, if you want to know if what you are doing results in a good society or a bad society, or if it is morally feasible, try to universalize it. Ask yourself, if every single person were to do what I'm doing, what would the result be for society? This is obviously the Kantian formulation. If every single person were to seek accountability through social media mobs driven by algorithms, rage, and hate, society collapses. And you have nothing left to conserve if you're conservative. You have no community. You have no social bonds. All of that dissolves because that mode of engagement is so frickin' toxic. Universalize your actions before you do them in these kinds of cases. So accountability is important, but where accountability comes from matters the most. But there's an error that my camp here also makes. Many people have been saying this is just a low-level, middle-class worker. Now you're punching down at middle-class people. Look, as I mentioned, I don't think the approach of libs of TikTok was appropriate here. I don't think mob justice is appropriate. But I also think that it's a mistake to moralize class. No matter what class you are, what race you are, what sexuality you are bound to the same universal principle of justice that everyone in civil society is bound to by virtue of being a human being possessing reason. Your class doesn't matter, your status doesn't matter. But when you're trying to evaluate impact for a political movement, then I guess class does matter. Because if the argument is that going after this little low-level woman beats the left, you have to ask yourself, in reality, is this true? Is some lady in some region of New York that most people don't even know exist, that is a low-level person at a cashier job, is she actually going to have is her firing going to have an impact on those in the institutional left like George Soros or others who occupy the heights of power in several different industries and the universities? Of course not. But in making that point, let's not moralize class. Someone's class does not give them a moral license to do things. Someone's class should not give them more sympathy. We should hold people to their actions as a general principle. So in evaluating these perspectives and in establishing that mob justice is not the way to pursue this, we should still account for the fact that accountability can come from a kind of what I call decentralized marginalization. In civil society, standards are important to ensure that those who are intolerant do not have the ability to harm those of us in civil society. So, for that very reason, again, if a boss wants to handle this, if the CEO wants to handle this, if this was handled in a different scale, in a different way, then that would be a different kind of way of correcting bad behavior than sicking her to the mob. This is not a matter of if we agree on what she did was right or wrong. Of course it was wrong. What matters is, what origin point do we want accountability to come from that will set a standard for the rest of society when engaging in these issues? A politics of antagonism, where conflict and friend versus enemy is the distinction drawn in political matters, is not one that is sustainable. It is not one that leads you to the best understanding of how to handle issues happening in society or in politics or in governance. It is not one that affords you the kind of charitability that is necessary for you to be a contributor to society or to your fellow man. And it is not one that lets you understand moral dynamics. It is a philosophy, a creed of ignorance. It is a philosophy, a creed of physiological confusion, where you let your physiology and your lower passions revert you to being pre-civil man, primitive man. And it is a creed, most importantly, of a rejection of the better angels of our nature. How do we fight the left? You fight the left by ensuring there are standards, but that those standards are not enforced through means that only deepen social divisions and only make people more angry and only entrench people into their hatred of their respective side, but instead handle issues in the best way possible, but in doing so gives charitability, in doing so gives forgiveness, in doing so gives understanding, and in doing so mends the bonds that have been broken by the ideologies of leftism or whatever other ideologies that have torn them apart. Be a doctor, not a demolitionist. But so many people want to be moral demolitionist these days. It's a damn shame. This woman made a Facebook post. She shouldn't have made the post. It's condemnable. She's suffering the consequences. But the way this happened is not a standard we ought to embrace in society. We are better than this, people. And if you unsubscribe from me or say, oh, Christian Watson, you're being a weakling, goodbye. I don't care. Because if you're going to listen to my voice and my thoughts, you're going to understand that there is a way to handle conflict in a manner that does not regress you to being a primitive slob who is no better than a caveman that writes on the wall with fucking chalk. Excuse me. If that's what you want, there's plenty of other people you can go watch. But as for me and my house, we're going to do our best to look at the better angels of our nature and repair what has been broken. That is my message. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe. We're going to have a revolution of the mind. I guarantee you, I promise you. Study history, my friends. Study philosophy. Remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.